All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today on our webinar on credentialing your staff and students with the CLR. Quick couple of logistical items just so everyone is aware. First, we are recording this presentation and we will send a copy of this out to everyone. For those who wish to avail themselves, closed captioning is available. At the bottom of the Zoom, you should be able to turn that on. And feel free to use the Q&A to ask any questions you have. We will try to answer some along the way if they work in, and otherwise we will try to cover them near the end of the presentation. We're going to talk about the One Ed Tech Comprehensive Learner Record Standard, or CLR standard, and the ways that it can help your students and your staff in that K-12 setting. We are joined today by two of our certified CLR issuers who have some real-world examples of how their organizations use the CLR to support students and teacher education. And so I will let their panelists introduce themselves in just a moment. But I want to kind of just do a quick level set of what the CLR is so that everyone's here is on the same page. So the Comprehensive Learner Record, it is an interoperable, verifiable, trusted way to provide students, learners, a way to capture and share all of their learning achievements, both those inside the classroom and outside the classroom, in a single record that then can be shared. And we'll hear more from our panelists about that in just a second. But also, the CLR really can help provide schools and districts. It's a way to empower learners, giving them a personalized, portable record of their achievements and their skills, and can help to improve student outcomes. It fosters a more equitable and inclusive learning environment, and it really can support your teachers and your staff in their own professional development. We'll put a link to a web page on the One Ed Tech website that has a little bit more information about the CLR if you want to drill into that a little bit more. But with that, I would like to let our panelists introduce themselves. Mike Flanagan, the CEO of Mastery Transcript Consortium, and Kimberly Wilson Linson, the Director of Credential Ecosystems from Level Data. And I should also say I am Rob Coyle, Technical Program Manager for Digital Credentials at One Ed Tech. As we go through our Q&A today, I'll be asking the questions, and Kimberly and Mike will have some answers for us. So with that, how about we start with you, Kimberly? Introduce yourself. Tell us what interests you in this work, specifically to credentials and CLR, of course. And how would you describe your work in this space?
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here and talk about the Comprehensive Learner Record. I think we all probably come to this table with the idea that we want humans, all of us, to be able to tell the story of our learning and achievements and have those in a way that is usable and not just in a plastic box under the bed at mom's house. So that is, I think, part of what drives me to be engaged in this work. I am the product leader at Level Data, and Level Data is a company who is really focused on helping K-12 institutions with their data in lots of different ways. We have lots of different data products around validation and integrations. And the focus that I have is really around educator talent. We came into the idea of credentialing through our work with educators and being able to license educators, being able to provide systems that help to track professional growth for educators. And all of those, as you can imagine, have a number of credentials tied to them, not just the credential that is the result of, but also all of the credentials that go into perhaps an educator license. And so several years ago, we started to investigate how digital credentials would enable that work to flow better, really with the idea that educators who had digital credentials would be able to use those as they move around and cross borders and be able to be licensed more effectively. And that work has sort of expanded into lots of different ways, into working with states who are piloting learning and employment record work, and into higher ed institutions who are wanting to issue CLRs to their students as evidence of all of the again, sort of that collective experience of achievements that they've had. And then now really looking into the K-12 space, and especially in particular around career and technical education. So that's sort of our focus of our work. And it's been exciting to be a part of this community for the last 5 or 6 years and see how it's matured, because I remember back when we were just trying to see if we could even sort of get a wallet to sort of display any kind of credential, and now we've come a long way. So I'm excited to be here.
Thanks, Kimberly. And Mike, same questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rob. So hi, everybody. I'm Mike Flanagan. I lead the team at a nonprofit organization called the Mastery Transcript Consortium. The best way to think about MTC is to focus on the consortium, actually. Today, we're going to be talking about the transcript. We're going to be talking about the CLR. But what actually kind of brought us into being, what kind of gives us our kind of mission, is a coalition of about 400 districts and schools across the country that are kind of really invested in a completely new architecture for high school. They want high school models that are more relevant, useful, and engaging. And I'm going to shamelessly borrow Kimberly's metaphor of the box because I loved it. Like when you said that box, like I saw it. I saw the box. It's got the trophies in it and the certificates and the ribbon from the county fair. All of that typically is the tangible evidence of extracurriculars, right? And our big idea for our schools is, what if those were curricular? Like, what if we actually organize learning about the stuff that kids are really, really invested in? And that's not to diminish traditional academics or content knowledge and acquisition. Those things are vital. But we know the evidence shows that we've got so many kids, millions really. Attendance is suffering across the country. We've got teachers that are burned out. Student mental health and well-being is suffering. There's a better way. There's a better way to do high school. And what gets really interesting and relevant to this discussion is that if you go all the way down the rabbit hole and you design a high school model that kids love and educators love and parents and caregivers love, it's going to start to look a lot less like traditional school and a lot more like almost like the world of work, like, or like experiential kind of how we learn things as adults. We have people working in teams, solving real world projects, learning new technologies or content things that are important and help them solve problems. And it's much more self-directed with a lot more autonomy and agency. So to build on what Kimberly said about, humans telling their stories, if you set up a school environment where learners are more self-directed and have agency, it's a shame to lose all of that by translating all of that rich self-directed work back into lists of courses and GPAs and credit hours. And yet, if you're a school and system leader on this call, you know that policy often requires you to sort of issue and measure learning that way. So for us, and we'll talk about the CLR and why we're excited about it, but for us, an extended transcript, a competency-based transcript that includes evidence of learning is the solution to that. It basically helps our schools embrace the learning models that they get excited about, but also issue a credential that is legible and meaningful and useful for all the gatekeepers and stakeholders that follow K-12, including higher ed and workforce.
Great. Thank you so much. So each of you in your introductions, you did talk a little bit around some of the specific use cases that your organizations are working on, but would you mind doing a little bit deeper dive and giving us maybe some more examples, talk us through what those look like, how they came to being, and really kind of what results you're seeing from that. So we'll go back to Kimberly, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off.
Sure. I think, the project that sort of, and just as Mike was talking, I was getting really excited about the work we're doing with the Tennessee Board of Regents, which is the governing body for all of the community and technical colleges in Tennessee. And they're like-minded with Mike around really wanting to make sure that their students have evidence not only of the course work that is part of their program, but also all of the other things that students might do that tell a future employer they're ready to come to work, that tell a future employee about the engagement of this particular individual, and then those high impact practices that are so important to learning and growing. And so that's why they sort of came to the CLR, was this idea of being able to tell a story around high impact practices, co-curriculars, program outcomes, and then of course, especially in a technical and community college setting, there are lots of certificates that students can earn along the way that have business value in the industries that they're going into. And so that was the sort of grounding principles, was to be able to provide students with those as a record. We've worked with a couple of really important partners in that work, which is Credential Engine, one, in that being able to have those areas defined within their competency frameworks so that those credentials and all the metadata and the rich information is easily accessible inside of the tiny little badge that is the credential, has been really important. So we've been working very, very over the last year with them, and they've been an incredible partner to that work. And then our other partner is Smart Resume. So actually, we are giving students the ability with the things that are in their comprehensive learner record to be able to then take those and directly import them into a Smart Resume, both from a direct sort of directly, and then also this spring we'll be rolling out the TBR Cred digital wallet, which will then have those credentials inside of their wallet and ready for them to be able to use. So that project, which has been about a year and a half in the making, has been really rewarding to sort of see how this work has again matured. And yeah, and we're excited for the next phase. I'm sure I'll talk more about it because I'm very invested in it, but I won't throw it all now. Give Mike a chance.
Sure. No, that's great. So Mike, yeah, if you wouldn't talk some of the high level use cases, and we have a question that came in from Ian around some of the items that you might consider putting in the CLR, the week to week learning activities, or some of the more substantial ones. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that as well.
Sure. Yeah, so whether it's real world learning or like I said, project-based learning that's interdisciplinary, that cuts across typical academic subject silos, right? We're going to hear a lot, both at Mastery Transcript schools, and that you'll see a lot in use on both on the screen and on the back end of our CLRs, is durable skills. So what we're really thinking is our competencies, right? As opposed to course titles. And so that honestly is one of the biggest and most valuable use cases. Traditional transcripts are academic subjects, course titles, credit hours, and GPAs. And that's it. And that, by the way, I don't want to diminish that. There's enormous value and standardization and portability of that. Like, just like the container ship, or the shipping container really led to a lot of kind of modernization and globalization of global trade. Packaging school in credit hours and Carnegie units had a value in its time. But the schools that we work with most closely are most excited about interdisciplinary durable skills. And so first, use case number one is that CLR gives us a place for those. It also gives us a place to tie those, to tag them, if you will, explicitly to what the lawyers like to call pupil-generated content, but the rest of us would call evidence, like evidence of learning. And this is the rich stuff that would normally be stashed away in the box that Kimberly talked about previously, right? So all the work you're going to do in a career-directed learning environment, any projects you might be doing, all of that stuff is not visible or legible to readers, but it is if you incorporate it inside a CLR context. So that's kind of, I think, at the K-12 level where we're seeing the most excitement. All the kind of lines are starting to move towards more broader adoption of personalized competency-based learning or competency-based education. And that's why I would say, one of the things I enjoy about One Ed Tech events is, you've got this really diverse set of stakeholders. But if you yourself are a technologist and you are supporting or talking to school leaders and educators who don't have a technology background, and they're basically saying, I don't get the CLR thing, I don't see it, ask them or listen for PCBL, competency-based education, real-world learning. If you have educators where that's where their interests are, they're in CLR land, they just don't know it yet. That's what I would say. And I would just say
Mm.
selfishly as an organization, we had a DIY approach to interoperability and portability for our records since 2019. What having the CLR enabled us to, it frankly gave us legitimacy and also a level of compliance. We sign DPAs as many organizations do all the time. One of the questions you're going to see a lot is, hey, if we terminate this agreement, how will you give us our data? How will you share this with us? You can always say, oh, we'll just dump a CSV file on you, right? But that is really unsatisfying for everybody. Being able to say, look, if worst comes to worst, we will publish for every learner we've ever encountered a CLR that is useful and portable both for your work and also for theirs. If they want to, if you decide to give that to them and they can take it with them, it provides a real level of comfort for decision makers and the end users of our stuff. It's both a future proofing and a current state sort of real important kind of checkbox for us.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, Mike, you just mentioned, right, giving it to your learners, them taking it with them. Do you see that? Are they taking it with them? What are they doing with these CLRs?
Yeah, we kind of I don't want to go too long form on this. I think that the version of portability that our learners use the most now is the more the front end interface that we give them. We equip every learner with a unique code that they can use and share as they see fit. So that just as you can get a PDF of a transcript, or you can use Parchment to send your transcript to a higher ed institution, our code basically can be used by learners at their discretion. They don't know that the code is being pointed to what is a front end for a CLR, but it is. And that's sort of what helps. And I think one of the things that I'm excited about, and one of the reasons I enjoy participating in conversations like this, is what we're really excited about is the moment where higher ed admissions starts pointing their kind of pipes at the CLR and ingesting it so that the folks in their offices can make more informed, high volume, high stakes decisions with richer and more better and more formatted and secure data.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess you started kind of talking about this. Let's drill in a little bit on some of the opportunities that you see. Kimberly, I know you and I have talked before around some of the great, again, opportunities that that learners are taking as they're building their CLR, and how even just sharing that, oh yeah, this thing exists, and you're getting a lot of word of mouth traction and things like that. So would you just share more thoughts on what those opportunities are?
Well, and you know how I feel about the CLR too, which just I think has multiplied those opportunities sort of
Yeah.
exponentially, because of the way that it breaks the credentials apart and allows for the user to really have ultimate control. I think, you know, one thing I didn't say sort of in my introduction about level data is we're a software company. Like we are focused on sort of technology and how the technology moves around. And so the reason that we are big fans of the CLR is because of its sort of technological flexibility, that it allows us to do lots of different things. And again, like what Mike was saying around that, you know, he's got a different front end that the student is looking at that's backed by a CLR. We've got a wallet, it's got CLR components in it. Those CLRs are the same and allow for sort of this ease of transport as credentials are moving around. And I think that is just going to unfold a lot of opportunities. I think, you know, in our use cases, what we've seen is that the CLR just solves so many problems at so many different levels. So, for example, in Colorado, we issue the teacher's license. The Colorado State teacher's license is issued as a can be issued as a CLR credential. That's not even really like an education use case, but because it really allowed for the flexibility of what we were after, it was the right solution. I think that's the other thing I would say is like that finding the right that like if this is the right solution, we tried a number of other things and arrived at the CLR. I think there's opportunities again, you know, across across all of these sort of segments, it allows us to it to not be sort of siloed in education, right? I know One Ed Tech is all about sort of education, but it just really allows us to cross that bridge to all the way from, from creating these comprehensive learner records from, like
Mhm.
let's even think further down the pipeline, like where we could start to be building that information and then how valuable that is to employers. I think we're going to start to, as a part of this community, I think one of the things we've sort of been shaking our heads and saying, well, where are the employers? Like, why are they not at the table? We really want to have the employers here to have this conversation with us. And it has been lacking. And I think that, one, the things Mike's talking about with this, with mastery, that's what employers want. They want the skills to be there for those folks. And how do you prove that? Well, you can prove it with a CLR. I think that it's really going to shift. I think I've been hearing a lot about um, the emergence of AI and the ease of use. That what's happening for employers is they're feeling some new pain, and that new pain is around um, that they used to get, 500 applications that they had to have their applicant tracking system weed through and look at to determine the top few candidates. Now they're getting multiple of that, and unfortunately all of those applications look eerily similar because they've been tailored to the requirements of the employer. And so that is just causing employers to be very confused about, how do I find the person I need, and how do I trust, there's that word, right? Or believe that what this person is telling me is true. And that is what the CLR also has, because of its verifiability. You can know that this is, and again, if you're, you have the data, the metadata behind it, no matter how, from Mike's perspective, they're doing that. If you're having Credential engine sort of come in and supply that ability is something employers are going to want. I think there's a big opportunity there that's like, I mean, I just see it kind of coming right at us.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah.
I
Mike?
will, yeah, I will build on that. So one of the things that brought me to the work personally is that my first job out of college was, I was a high school English teacher. And so my job for a few years was to teach the so-called 5-paragraph essay. And while my students were in my class, one of their jobs, if you will, was to learn how to write the 5-paragraph essay. And so when we talk about AI eliminating millions of jobs, like that's the first to go. Like that idea of like that is a value-added school exercise. Please don't misunderstand me. Understanding how to write is vitally important, like, and it's not going to go away. But the way we think about what the input and output is for young people, when any young person has, with a click of a mouse, access to pretty much college level prose on any topic on demand, it really upends what we think about the kind of methodology of instruction in our classrooms where folks are basically making peace with and embracing AI. It's because they have confidence that kids are doing authentic work because they're giving them real world performance tasks, right? They're basically giving them long form projects, directed, kind of like self-directed work, or working on client projects. And then they're asking them not just to write something about it, which they can do with a click, but to get up and talk about it, right? Present their findings, answer real questions. At that point, you can't chat GPT that, at least not yet. And so all of that for the, is, so there's a layer in which rich information and authentic performance assessment becomes a bulwark against what AI could do to traditional schooling, but also flips the other way around. I think one of the areas where you'll get pushback from K-12 school leaders and classroom educators is that, look, I love the idea of portfolio-based assessment. Like that's been around forever. That's been around before computers. It comes from the idea of actually having a folder with pieces of paper in it, multiple pieces of writing or art. When you look at, though, how a college admissions officer, or earlier, like you said, Rob, a hiring manager might use a portfolio, the hard truth is that nobody wants those because they're too much work and they don't have expertise to evaluate them. So all the things that make them potentially rich for education purposes and also in K-12, too much overhead, too much time on task, too many moving pieces. Well, now
Mhm.
flip that around and think of those as inputs for the AI systems that will be reading and processing applications and folders in the future. Now, rich, highly structured metadata, a corpus of text with appropriate tags and XML on it, that's suddenly a huge plus, not a liability. So the biggest
Mhm.
opportunity for us is that CLR is an existing infrastructure for us to start collecting that information in ways and structuring it so that the machines that will follow us very, very quickly are going to be really well positioned to extract more from it and add more value more quickly.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. Um, we've got a couple of minutes now, and there's some questions that have come in that I think are kind of appropriate to chat about really quick. So I'll just cover the question. I'll put a voice to it, and either one of you are happy to feel free to jump in here. So this question is from Bob. Would love to hear some insights on incorporating CCL acquired KSAs into the CLR. Uh, Bob's program there curates real world trainings as 60-hour internships for high school students with local employers. So any thoughts there on how we can capture that within the CLR?
I can just briefly tell you how our schools would do it or are doing it
Yeah,
today, but then we could riff on sort of other ways we could be doing it better in the future. So,
sure.
for us, yeah, the C in personalized competency-based learning, competency-based means moving away from seat time, right? And if you are embracing competency and mastery versus hours of instruction, it opens up the idea of crediting learning that happens outside of our view as educators, right? So all of the schools that we have competency models. These kind of roughly correlate to the KSAs that I think would be in place for the kind of program that we're talking about here. And what we're going to try and do is create a mechanism, a workflow by which the work that's being done outside of the classroom can be brought into the classroom and reviewed side by side, learners and educators together. And that's really the key. So it's great for learners to do things outside of school. The learning actually happens when they reflect on it very deliberately and they themselves are able to say and articulate, or we give them conditions and ask them to articulate, hey, it's great that you did this thing. What specifically did you learn, or do you think you learned? Where would you take this next if you had more time? That loop of reflection and curation is sort of what makes this happen. And the CLR, in that case, is just kind of a workbench or a holding kind of vessel for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah. Kimberly?
Maybe one of the things I would say is that, I think we use the CLR and comprehensive learner record and, all the other data standards that are out there. And it took me a minute to like just figure this out or get it to the level where I could really understand it, which is we're just talking about tables. We're just talking about data. We're just talking about like it, right? Like it's just where are you going to put that piece of information so that I can go find it later that has an easy address to go to, or I can have a lot of it and I can identify it quickly into a CLR because there's a structure and a format. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's one of the things that we really appreciate about the CLR is that it's so flexible. You really can, I just told you we used it for a teacher license. You really can use it as it stands today for anything you want. You just have to sort of figure out what are the things that are important for me to be saying about this thing, these five things, this data point, 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 and then look at the CLR and figure out where they map.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a human exercise right now. Um, and it's a good one, actually, when you do it yourself and you sort of like really ask those questions around how does this data map and why would I put this here instead of here? And when it comes out the other side for the student, how is it going to be most meaningfully expressed?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I think once you just sit down and sort of, in fact, when I was talking about the Colorado license, that's exactly what we did. We took a paper Colorado license and I went through it and I circled each piece and I was like, this is this and this is this. And we just mapped it out. And so I think you can do that with
Mm-hmm.
anything you want to represent in the CLR.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree. What about I guess just thinking that taking that to a little bit more practical, Jane asked a question in the Q&A, is the CLR appropriate for a professional development course to help an educator validate their accomplishment or earn credit from a higher ed institution? This really close to the work that you're doing right now, Kimberly, with teacher licensure. How would you respond to that?
100%. And
Mhm.
again, I already was like the CLR2, the CLR2. But that's what's so beautiful about the CLR2 is that because inside of the CLR2 are open badges,
Mhm.
right? So you have those open badges that might be stackable, that you might be, maybe there's only one. So I have CLRs that have one open badge in them, but they still have
Mhm.
that CLR wrapper to them.
Right.
And then you could have 50. So depending on how you're doing your professional learning, then that those can all go in there. And I will tell you, that as I manage the licensure product, this is definitely um, a piece that I want is for you to be able to just have them be able to send those directly. And we have a number of states who will automatically renew a license based on the professional development that the educator has done. So it would be great if you're issuing those CLRs and I'm accepting them, and then that license is just being automatically issued to the teacher.
Mhm.
Save a lot of time
Mhm.
for everyone.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. That'd be good. That's awesome. I want to pick up on just it's a question that Noah put in the Q&A, although I know he's kind of planted this because Noah is very passionate about the idea of there being a CLR or the CLR, when in reality, right, you may have multiple CLRs from multiple organizations throughout your journey, right? Each education institution, for example, might issue you a CLR as you go through your K-12 or your higher ed experience and workplace, right? You even have employers who are also issuing CLRs to recognize the professional development that you've done there, or the fact that you work there and the skills that you have and things like that. So it's definitely not a one learner, one CLR. It really what can be a variety of CLRs that you're getting within all of those different contexts. Uh, so let me ask this. We talked about the opportunities, so let's be honest around the challenges. So what are some of the real challenges that you see out there? Mike, we'll start with you this time, and then Kimberly, we go over to you. I know you've got a family story also to share around this. So Mike, why don't you kick us off? What are the challenges that you see?
Well, James in the Q&A addressed one of these, which is the issue of like verification or sort of like rigor. I think, this is something that plagued some of the early days, not on the technology side, but on what you might call the semantic side of like some badging
Mhm.
initiatives, right? Where if the bar is too low for what it means to issue or receive a badge, then it has the unfortunate consequence of like devaluing like the concept in general. Like you don't want to flood the market with like not less meaningful data.
Mhm.
I didn't mention this at the outset, I should have. As of May, MTC is now part of ETS.
Mhm.
We are still an independent organization, but we're a wholly owned subsidiary. And that transaction happened specifically because ETS is doubling down on an initiative called Skills for the Future. And Skills for the Future is designed to address head on this idea of verification and third party validity of durable skill measurement and assessment. And so what we're bringing to the table is, digital infrastructure for transcripting and skills passports. What ETS, as you probably all know, is very good at is assessment, and particularly next generation assessment that looks less like set and get tests and more like the kind of portfolios that I've been getting fired up about, kind of earlier in the conversation. But so that one thing, rigor, is really important. I would also say too that the idea of like, Jessica said, hey, which industries are latching on to this?
Mhm.
We're in the middle of sort of a cold start problem. That if you haven't read that book, I really strongly recommend it. It talks about sort of businesses that require scale and network effects to truly deliver on their value proposition. And in the world of credentialing, get this critical mass of senders and receivers on both ends. And how do you get that flywheel turning is really essential for us. My
Mhm.
wish list is, I alluded to it earlier, is for the folks that are in college admissions offices to really embrace the technology. They don't understand yet. It's incumbent on us collectively, right, to help them understand how it's going to make their world easier. I really think it will, but it also will make our world easier as issuers at the K-12 level if we can say with authority, yeah, the CLR is not just a nice concept. Even when you have it, it opens, it expedites, it facilitates the movement of this essential rich picture to college gatekeepers. That's a real big kind of wish list item for me.
Great. Kimberly?
I mean, I definitely think, just to sort of take off of what Mike was saying, I think that the challenge between like verification and validation, like I think sometimes we kind of in this community have gotten those words kind of jumbled a little bit. And so I think it's important to really like call out the distinction. So as I said before, I'm a software provider. We are not in the business of validation. That's Mike's job, right? We're in the business of providing a verifiable credential that came from Mike, right? Like it was trusted, that source was trusted, and then being able to give you access to what I loved in Noah's comment, like the nutrition facts, right? Like that we can link out to Credential Engine so that you can see like what's in this. That's I think where there's a lot of challenges around the community about like how do you say this thing and this thing are the same? Right? Even we see this even, in the data that we validated and integrated on in some of the other products at Level Data, that schools and districts have problems with just equating a course from one place to another. I think that's a big challenge. I think the other is, just as Mike was saying, is the cold start problem, is getting everyone to the table at the same time. And I was thinking about this. Rob and I were at a meeting last month where we were talking about is a public utility, right? That we would like it to be that. And so if we think about it as like water, right? Like everybody's got evidence, right? Everybody's got all these things that they've collected. It's like water. And so what is necessary to the water's in the lake right now, and we've just decided to build a town on the edge of the lake. Like, how do you get the water? Where does it start? How do you get the pipes flowing? And so, like, if you think about all the sort of steps that need to happen, you got to have an aqueduct. I'm going to get out of way out over my skis here, but like an aqueduct, and you got to have then, pipes that, water treatment plant, and then you got to have pipes that run through the streets, and then eventually a pipe that goes into the house. And that isn't even enough, right? Because then you have, your sink and your toilet and your shower that has to get connected to that water source. And so I think when we're thinking about that analogy, um, I honestly was, this is the challenge, is that I think we've sort of started with, I've got a toilet. What can I connect it to? And there's really nothing to connect it to yet. We didn't start with sort of the pipes underneath the street, or even the water treatment plant next to the reservoir. So like we're trying to sort of like, okay, now let's sort of put the pretty fixtures aside. Those are really, that digital wallet is awesome, but it doesn't really solve sort of all of these problems about how we sort of have these mass credentials that we want to be able to flow like water all through all the different pipes and all into all of the different fixtures. And so I think that's maybe the one of the biggest challenges to getting this really sort of usable and not just in sort of like, this is a great use case and this one over here is a great use case, but like it's everywhere. We're gonna have to figure out how to solve that problem.
I just want to double click the public utility metaphor. I think that's spot on. For me, I think a lot when I talk about the work with educators. A metaphor I use sometimes is electric vehicle chargers or charging systems, right? Like you need both. You need vehicles that people want to buy, and you need a charging infrastructure so that those vehicles will get them where they want to go. And say what you will about Elon Musk's latest exploits, I think one of his original insights was first thing you do, just make a badass car, make something that people want, right? That they will drive. And then when the problem presents itself, well, wait, how am I going to drive this out of state? How am I going to get a driver across the country? Now you've created demand, and then private and then eventually public infrastructure money can follow there. And so I think it kind of brings us full circle to the question that got asked earlier about employers and employer uptake, and Kimberly started with this too, is the moment where we can show somebody, hey, this particular offering, this solution can help you, a young person, get where you want to go, right? And where that is an apprenticeship or a learn and earn program or a job that they wouldn't normally have access to because their traditional academic profile may not have presented as them being a good candidate. That's the moment where people are going to be like, tell me more about these things. How do I get one of those charging stations in my parking lot so people show up here? That's, I think, where things are going to start to get interesting.
Great.
One of my big takeaways from this webinar is going to be that the CLR is the Tesla of the credential world.
I can get behind that. Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk to the marketing department over there at One Ed Tech.
Sure, on it. On it. Hey, so I think one of the questions that a lot of people are no doubt having is, well, how do I get started, right? Where do we begin? And so can we just kind of think about and talk briefly around what are the recommendations? How would someone get started if they're interested in creating a CLR, bringing it to their institution, et cetera?
Do not do something new. That is the biggest mistake I've seen people make is don't like envision like, okay, well, this thing over here. Look at what you already have. There are already credentials, there are already things you want to award. Maybe you're not doing it, maybe it's an email that says, hey, you did this thing, good for you. Like, how could you turn that into a CLR? Like that's the place I think to start. And then I think the second place is to then once you've identified that, then start looking at how it maps, doing that human effort. But just start with just a few. I always really like doing that, and I think there's lots of tools now that you can sort of take a CLR and build one, and then you can sort of see how it looks and be like, oh, that's not enough. Like we want more, right? So I think that's iterating around that, I think is a great place to start.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I think, this don't creating something new is my inflection of that. And we learned this the hard way is don't ask people to change their behavior so that they can use the new technology. Find people whose behaviors are creating pain for them that the technology then solves or alleviates, right? So if you are, and I can really only speak deeply to K-12 practice, but if you're inside a school district or a state kind of an SEA, what you're looking for really are the teachers and the building and district leaders that are doing cool stuff, right? They're already doing projects. They're already doing messy real world things. Go to them and say, hey, do you want to work with us on piloting a way of like actually making sure this stuff gets traction to the wheels? Like we can issue kids something that captures what they're actually doing. That's I think where you're gonna get more buy-in. And like I said, we have battle scars because in the early days of MTC, before we had a product and we were just saying, hey, we want to do school differently, we want to do credentialing for school differently. We had a lot of people say, that sounds great, I'd love to do that. And then we realized, oh, they wanted the end state. They wanted to issue the new shiny transcript, but they didn't actually want to change school. Changing school is brutal. It's really hard. You have to be highly motivated. So we are over-indexed in our network of districts and schools who are already doing it for other really good reasons, like the ones that I cited, either because the old ways weren't working, they've got kids who have been traditionally underserved and they've been given a mandate to change, or, and increasingly, they're in an environment that looks like it's doing really well, where the kids are getting good grades and the stickers on the cars when the kids go off to college make all the parents happy, but the kids are suffering, right? Because the school machine is not, it lacks those sort of authentic agency kinds of characteristics that, sort of are essential to human development. And they want a better way. So once they're bought into that, then you won't have to convince them that these kinds of credentials are helpful for them.
So what's our call to action? We've got a whole group of people on this call who are obviously have some sort of interest around CLR or helping their staff and their students. Where do we leave everyone today? What's our ambitious call of action?
I'll go first. Oh no, Kimberly's going first. Go, Kimberly.
I was just gonna say, I think I would just come right back to what I just said a minute ago is find one credential,
Mhm,
make it into a CLR. I know I'll put myself out there. You can email it to me, and I'll see what it looks like when I put it in a wallet, and see
mhm,
if it'll render. Um, that's the test, right? Is it usable on the other side? I think, we're you got to play with it. I think that maybe that's what I'm trying to say is don't set this big like we're gonna our whole institution in the next 3 years. I mean, maybe that's where you are is to do that strategic planning. I know that's where TBR was when we came into the story,
mhm,
but I think before that they did a lot of playing around and sometimes um, playing with these credentials is a really good first step.
yeah, I would agree.
Um, I if you look at our schools, a lot of them teach their kids things that look like design thinking and entrepreneurship, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of it's because they're interdisciplinary and they're pretty flexible, but honestly, I think one of it's because they all kind of embrace the virtue of like, try something, move
Mhm,
first. It's not going to work, like, but test it and repeat and iterate. The best way to start is to get started. And so what I would say is, if in the K-12 context, find those educators that might be willing to give you the time because they're passionate about the learning side of it,
mhm,
and then roll up your sleeves. And then the other thing is there's a whole ecosystem out here. I am so grateful to you, Rob, and the team for giving me and opportunity to talk about our work and to kind of share the conversation with Kimberly. But like there's a bunch of amazing organizations that are doing PCBL work out there. And so if you're interested, we are always happy to make connections. We're a nonprofit. Our doors are open. This is all about collaboration. So if you're not sure where to start or you want to pick brains on how to get started, don't be afraid to ask for help and we can point you in the right direction. Our
mhm,
organization name is a mouthful, Mastery Transcript Consortium, but we're easy to find. It's mastery.org. So
mhm. Great, thanks. And so I'm looking at the time. We have about 10-ish minutes left. There's a few questions in the Q&A that I'd like to get to. But before we do, I'm going to ask you kind of one final question here. Your bold predictions for the future. All right. If this works, what's going to be different in, say, 5 years?
I'll describe it as a moonshot goal. Okay.
Okay.
I think if we're all successful, um, kids are no longer going to have to stop learning in order to be assessed. Because that's how learning works today. Like I'm
Mhm,
learning, I'm doing cool stuff. It's like, hey, everybody freeze. Now it's time to actually assess you, whether it's a unit level assessment in a classroom or it's a state
mhm,
accountability test. And I just feel like, wow, wouldn't it be great if you didn't have to just take all the authentic work, the messy stuff that they're doing, and point the engine at that.
mhm,
And that will generate the data that will feed into these rich records that we know are going to provide a lot of value and portability.
mhm. That's great. Kimberly, what's your bold prediction?
Well, I mean, so I feel like I've been a part of this community for a long time. We've made a lot of bold predictions, and thus I have learned that, this is moving slower than I want it to. And so when I think about sort of 5 years, I want to say things like, my son who will be graduating from high school in 5 years will have, CLRs from his that I don't know that I see that. I don't know that I can go out and say like I think that we're going to get there in 5 years. I
Mhm,
think that if we can in 5 years have the full ecosystem working in a number of spots,
mhm,
that would be great, right?
mhm,
Like if we have the full learning is happening and being recognized with digital records,
mhm,
those digital records are being held in a place again, not under the plastic box, right? But like now I have a digital wallet or some sort of way that I can hold all of those things, and
Mhm.
I can share them with employers, and employers are making decisions on those, and trusted institutions are able to be sort of trusted in that ecosystem. And we have the whole ecosystem flowing
Mhm.
in a number of places. We'd like one of those places to be with the educator career
Mhm.
workspace. We feel like
Yeah.
we can do that. Again, it's easy, right? Because you've got districts who are the hiring of the, right? So it's kind of closed. I also think that there's a big appetite for this um, in the emergency services, first responders community. We're doing some work with them. That may be another spot. Nursing, I know, has been. Advanced manufacturing is one we've been talking about. Like if there's a number of sort of places,
Mhm.
sort of that picture, I guess, of a map where there's like little circles, and then those circles start to sort of overlap, and then the circles start to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I think that's how it's going to happen. And so I hope in 5 years there are lots of little circles
Mm.
all over the
Yeah.
learning and workforce map.
Mhm. Oh, that's great. Awesome. I'm going to add my own bold prediction, not that anyone asked, but I'm going to do it anyway. I don't know if it'll be in 5 years, but truly, I think, as you alluded to earlier, Mike and Kimberly, you too, right? Now, everyone looks perfect on paper now, thanks to ChatGPT, right? All of our resumes are perfectly aligned to the job postings. All of our application letters or cover letters are perfect and identical. And so there needs to be a way to cut through some of this. And I think the verification of the credentials, all of the extra metadata that we can include in there that then can be instantly verified out, I think that's going to help cut through and really enable the employers or the higher ed institutions who are, making decisions around learners to admit. It's going to help them get all that extra data to make better decisions faster. And I think that's a key element there. So again, I don't know, 5 years, maybe not, but I do think that's going to be something we're going to see in the future. All right, we've got a couple minutes left, so let's jump into some of the questions that are still outstanding. I know I've also been seeing a lot of questions popping up in the chat and also some answers, so appreciate everyone's contributing there and sharing of resources. So Sudesh, hi, how are you? Good to see you today. Sudesh's question, how do institutions create their own CLRs to make them useful and globally recognized?
I can speak a little bit to the
Yeah.
TBR.
Mhm.
I think they have a transcript already, and they have a diploma already. And so they didn't sort of go to replicating that, but they looked sort of to where they weren't awarding or giving learners the ability to tell a story around
Mhm.
things they wanted the learners to be able to tell a story about around. And so that is where they started. And so the CLR is a companion document to their transcript. So I think that's a good place for an institution to start because you probably have those.
Mm.
And so you can identify, and again, I said it's been 18 months that we've been working on this work. So it was first identifying the 4 areas: high impact practices, co-curriculars, certificates, and program outcomes that we wanted to address in CLR. And then it is getting institutions to figure out where the programs have those alignments to those things, then how to define those things, right? That's work that takes human effort to
Mhm.
be able to sort of what is the definition here, in order to be able to get to a point where you can, where that information is being recorded somewhere in your student information system. And then once you get there, once you have all that data in your student information system and available, then it's very easy from there to go in, pull it out, package it as a CLR, and send it wherever you want. So I think that's where institutions kind of have to develop a strategic plan that probably does take sort of when I was saying, where to
Mhm.
start with play, but then, I think you probably do need kind of a strategic plan of we're defining here, we're going to award here in a timeline.
Yeah.
Great. Absolutely. All right. Down to the wire. But Ted has asked this question in the chat in the Q&A, and I think it's a great place to kind of end here. Is there a platform for post-secondary or correctional education programs to incorporate CLRs into resident or inmate records, data tracking storage while incarcerated? This would provide residents with the ability to access their education credentials for post-incarceration for continuing ed and/or employment opportunities, i.e., provide resumes and education certifications. So are either of
Yeah,
you aware of anything? Yeah,
I
please.
am not aware of the platform per se. I can't name a provider. What I would say is that we actually see more uptake in learning institutions where learning is pressured by exigent circumstances, right?
Mm.
So like in other words, there's in traditional like well-funded models, like a lot, the traditional ways work a lot. And so there's a reason if you look at the list of MTC schools, you're going to see that we actually got schools where like youth are incarcerated. We've got schools where they serve students with visual and hearing disabilities. We've got schools that are on federal native lands. And there are places where like stuff can be hard, and so different approaches, there's more appetite and they can be more useful and more highly leveraged. So so I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, boy, if there isn't one, there should be.
Yeah,
So
agreed.
again, I don't, not necessarily again, I don't have a platform level answer, but I do know that this is one of the two priorities that the state of Arkansas is focused on. So if I think Rob will have my email somewhere in here.
Mhm.
If you want to email me, I'm happy to connect you with the folks that are leading the work there in Arkansas around incarcerated population and how to be able to give them agency over the credentials. They earn, right? Many of those are industry credentials that they're earning while incarcerated, and how there's a lot of like challenges around where those, how those, when the individual gets agency over those credentials, and how to give them that sort of while they're incarcerated and then after. And they've done a lot of really innovative thinking around that. So I would be happy to connect you with the team there.
Thank you so much for that answer. I know there's a couple other questions. I'm afraid we are just completely out of time. Hopefully we can connect afterwards to answer some of these questions. I do want to, of course, thank everyone for their participation today, and also say that I hope we can continue these conversations in the future. We just put up a slide around the Digital Credentials Summit coming up March 3 through 5 in Phoenix. It's a great summit. This is its 9th year running, and a good opportunity for us to get together in person to continue these great conversations. I'm going to put in the chat an actual discount code for everyone who came today. Thank you. We appreciate your time. And as such, we do have a discount code that you can use. It's available until January 24th. So feel free to grab that out of the chat so that you can hopefully avail yourself of that. And also, I know we've had some more technical stuff. In the next couple of weeks, before the end of the month, we'll be releasing a 5-minute tech introduction to the CLR. Hopefully, you can build on some of the conversation we had around the data and what all can be included in that. So thank you so much for all of your time today. Thank you to our panelists, Mike and Kimberly and Kelly, for helping on the back end. We'll be sending out this recording. We will include some of the great resources and links that were shared today. And thank you all again for coming. Really looking forward to continuing these conversations. Appreciate your time. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. This was a lot of
Thanks,
fun.
everyone. It's been a
Thank
treat.
you.